Welcome to Private Politics, where we prepare you for your next political conversation. I'm Jeronimo Cortina, political science professor at the University of Houston.
And I'm Brandon Rottinghaus, a political science professor, also here at the University of Houston. Thanks for hanging out with us and talking a little politics on Party Politics. Kind of exciting week. Lots of big geopolitical stories, lots of big stories that will definitely have an effect on the 2024 election. And the big news, at least here locally, is that John Whitmire has hit his 100-day mark, which is not something we traditionally think about for like a city executive, but for national executives, we think about a 100-day window. Yep. So our question is, along the lines of what Ed Koch, former mayor of New York, used to say, how are we doing?
Yeah.
So we'll talk about that in a second. But let's first get to these big issues that are national and really international in origin. And they have to do with the ongoing crisis in the Middle East. President Biden this week spoke with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for the first time after an Israeli strike had killed 7 humanitarian workers in Gaza. Basically, the message from the president to the prime minister was that U.S.'s support in the future was going to be dependent on aid to Gaza, and at least some sort of sense that the relationship was going to be open to protecting civilians and humanitarian workers. He was very clear about this. He's definitely losing his patience.
Yeah.
And I think part of the problem is that, of course, politically, he's in a real tough spot here. Netanyahu is also in a tough spot. Yep. He's got to protect the right flank, who wants to see action on this, which there's no question that he should. And it's been kind of a political thicket for both of them. So what do you make of this sort of new normal, really, for the U.S. and Israel?
Well, I think that the White House, especially President Biden, has changed their tone, right? Yeah. And their tone is now more, imagine in the Obama administration or it was Bush. I think it was Bush in terms of let's draw a line in the sand. So I think that he has drawn the line in the sand, and now they're getting closer to that line. So I think that change of tone is very important. In an interview with Univision, Biden said he thinks that this strategy is wrong and that he does not support it. So I think that the change has come, and we have seen, for example, now that there has been more aid going into Gaza. There is a proposal for a 6-week ceasefire, release of prisoners, exchange of prisoners, and obviously those that were hostages and that are still under control of Hamas. The Biden administration said, we're allies, we'll give you military equipment and so on, aid or whatever it is. However, but
you have to hit these marks.
Exactly. Right? And if they don't hit those marks, I think that now the Biden administration, given the domestic political issue, is going to say, you know what, buddy?
Kind of walk away from it, which would be stunning, actually, a real reversal in terms of where the U.S. has been, and definitely a point of contention for Republicans who are really on the attack on the Biden administration, saying that they're not supporting Israel enough, who's been a long-standing advocate and ally for the U.S. So that's interesting. But Israel is increasingly becoming isolated in the world. And part of it is this sort of narrative that's taken hold about the left who want to see more protections. I think that this will probably work. I mean, I do think that the president here is going to potential to be able to kind of sort of settle this situation, at least enough that he can claim that he's able to have neutralized some of the serious problems. But obviously, as things happen on the ground, there's going to be these sorts of moments that are going to test this. So it's definitely complicated. And the Democrats remain divided about what to do. And if that continues through the election, then I think you're still going to see that tension. Republicans aren't doing them any favors either, right? They're twisting the knife here, presenting resolutions that basically denounce efforts to place a one-sided pressure on Israel. And so they'd like to see kind of a more holistic approach. And that's a bit a problem.
I don't think it is something that Biden doesn't have to worry too much about Democrats in Congress, right? He needs to worry about those potential voters in the 2024 election. And even though that there has been these vote of quote unquote no confidence in some of these primaries, nothing too alarming or anything like that. But if everything this presidential election is going to be close, so in very important states as well.
Yeah.
So every vote,
every vote matters.
Every vote matters, and that's what I think.
You should trademark that. Like, I like that.
Yeah.
If everybody uses it, they have to send you a dollar.
Yeah. Royalties, please.
Royalties.
I'll Venmo my.
Yeah. What's your Venmo?
Yeah.
But I think you're right. Like, you definitely have to have kind of stability here and unity going into 2024. But I think they'll get that. In fact, Pew's polling this week has come out that basically looks at these longitudinal trends over 20 years, right? Support for the parties from various groups. You don't see a lot of changes. So although the headlines are going to say like, oh, Latino vote shifting, and black Texans or black voters aren't really following the Democratic Party, like, it's probably wrong.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
There are historical trends.
And we have made that argument 11,000 times, but you
know what? We'll see. We'll just keep making it until
it catches up.
Until it catches on. Until that's the headline, right? But look, the Democrats aren't the only party that's going to have to deal with internal divisions. Obviously, Republicans too. This week, Donald Trump, after sidestepping the issue directly of abortion for months, has come out with his kind of approach, let's say plan, but really it's a kind of Swiss cheese policy. Okay. Here's what it is. Basically, what he says is that he takes credit for ending Roe versus Wade, and he takes credit because he appointed the justices that really the swing votes. But he also says that this should be a state issue.
Okay.
And so along the lines of what the Dobbs decision says, he suggests that basically states should make their own choices.
Right.
That is what we call in this business a non-answer.
Oh, okay.
And it's probably a policy that's likely to really fall flat among everybody, right? Everybody's mad because the people who are on the far right want a much more firm policy. The Senate had considered pursuing legislation on a 15-week ban.
Right.
That's getting consensus. Probably wouldn't pass the Senate right now, but obviously the election's going to come and you're going to see some changes potentially. So that's in the cards. But now kind of off the table, assuming that Trump consistently kind of holds his position. So what do you make of Trump's position and the way that's going to affect the 2024 election?
Oh, it's going to affect it, right?
It has to, right? Yeah.
I mean, we have seen in many states that abortion has been the key issue given victories where you would not expect to see Democrats win.
Yeah.
So I think that that's a pivotal moment and very risky decision, right? Yeah. Because at the end, as you say, it's Swiss cheese.
Yeah.
Like the right is not happy. Mike Pence came out and say this is slap in the face. So the evangelicals, conservatives see it as a no-go.
Yeah. They'll still push for it regardless, right?
Exactly, right? And then you see, obviously, Democrats or the more liberal saying, no way. Yeah. So it's basically
everyone's mad. All it really has done is kind of prolong the politics of it. Right. It didn't really settle it. And I'm not sure what would settle it, at least in terms of, even just the Republican Party. But for sure, it's the case that they're worried about this. So the fact that everyone kind of had to come out and make a statement about this definitely shows that. But I also think that it's clear that the far right has no place else to go.
Right.
Who else are they going to vote for? Are they just, maybe they don't vote, but it's not like they're going to vote for Joe Biden.
No.
So those limitations really do show how much partisanship matters here, where now people are kind of hemmed in terms of this policy and don't really have any place to go. So that's going to be interesting. And obviously, Donald Trump's going to have to kind of sort of sort this out, right? It's clear that his approach, which allows for some exceptions, sort of a la Ronald Reagan, as he said, isn't what Texas is doing, right? And it also isn't what Arizona is doing, right?
Oh.
So Arizona actually, literally, like days after the former president made this speech, came out with a Supreme Court ban at the state level that upheld a 160-year-old law that bans abortion in all cases. This also created a firestorm in Arizona, where we're going to have a very competitive Senate race. Carrie Lake, who's the Republican nominee, came out and said she opposed the Supreme Court ruling.
Okay.
She, though, in the past had actually embraced it, so she's going to have to do some explaining there.
John Kerry, I'm waiting for that flip-flop.
Yeah, that's right. I love that ad. The wind sail, when he flips something like that, actually would really well. And so, but I think as you're implying here, the advertising on this is going to be really key, right? How you spin this. But to me, this means potentially that abortion is going to overtake immigration as a big issue, certainly in Arizona, which is in some sense a bellwether for a lot of Western states and other swing states.
Yeah, I definitely think so. It's Democrats are trying to put, especially in Arizona, about proposition to make abortion a constitutional right, that the right to an abortion before 24 weeks. And there is traction, right? Yeah. And again, abortion is an important issue because it pulverizes the voting blocks in such a way, right?
Yeah.
And here you're talking about, for example, suburban women, right? That in, one way or the other might have been thinking, well, I'm going to vote for Trump or Biden, when you introduce, for example, immigration, right? Yeah. But now that abortion is here, I think it's clear in terms of what they might do, as they have done, for example, they did in 2018 and 2020. So it's another good way of dividing the electorate, especially suburban women that, once again, are going to be, in my humble and uneducated opinion, are going to be, the voting bloc that is going to have a significant decision power in 2024.
I think you're right, yeah. And, I don't have an Ivy League education like you do, but I also agree with you, most because you're cueing me on this. But for sure it's the case that I think that you're fundamentally right that this is going to be an election of margins. And so the abortion decision definitely peels off suburban women, but also kind of educated males in these suburban swing counties. You also have younger voters, especially younger Democratic voters, who are very enthusiastic about this issue. And so those are the kind of things that really do juice up support. And that's what Joe Biden needs. And frankly, what all of these candidates at the lower levels, lower down ballot races are going to need. But speaking of down ballot races, most people don't talk a lot about city politics, but it's so much of how we live our lives that it's critical. So John Whitmire hit his 100-day mark as the mayor of Houston. Let's talk about that. This is Party Politics. I'm Brandon. This is Jeronimo. We live in the city of Houston. We have a mayor for 100 days. How's he doing? Give me the updates.
Well,
highs and lows.
I think it's an interesting, start for his administration, right? When you look, for example, just at the local bureaucracy, 7 out of 10 heads of departments have been replaced one way or other. New hires, that's, normally very common when you have a new administration. You want to create your team. So 7 out of 10 are now starting a new administration with Mayor Whitmire. You have obviously the now around $1.5 billion solution for the firefighters. That was a campaign promise, during the first 100 days. It has fiscal implications, especially these judgment bonds that are something that it's odd in terms when you think in municipal finance literature. But, we'll see what happens.
See if it works,
and then you have, changing more than 100,000 water meters.
Yes.
You have also some controversy in terms of medians and here and there. And, of course, increasing property taxes. There's talks about, $15 or something like that.
Right.
Because we need money.
The city needs money. As you say, I think that there are some wins here and some potential kind of sticky points. I feel like he's still getting his feet set, right? He's gone from being kind of one of 31 members in a chamber that's dominated by the opposition party to being really in charge of an entire city and with the capacity to be able to more or less do as he wishes. That's a tough kind of balance to make. So I feel like he's still kind of getting his feet set. But we have seen hints that maybe he doesn't mind being the boss, right? So in addition to the sort of, really kind of sort of strong negotiation over the firefighters issue that council complained they didn't have much say in. There's going to be some serious financial ramifications to that. So we'll see how that plays out. The city currently has about $428 million in reserves, about $241 million more than they have to maintain. There's a projected deficit of $160 million next year, but that's even before the firefighters deal, which they still have to kind of figure out details on. So how is this going to get paid for? Like you say, probably taxes. That's a tough ask, right? Here you've got a kind of mayor who ran as a Democrat but a moderate, and Republicans flocked to him in droves, and now he's going to raise taxes. That might be a challenge, I think, for re-election. But the issue here is that it's so early, and if the city's fiscal house is in order, so that they can make some of these big moves they want to make down the road and actually invest in things like crime and infrastructure that he promised, that might actually solve the problem. So this had to be solved first. So I think that that's probably the only way to go about it.
And, it's going to be a combination, right? I think it's going to be a hike in taxes, right? because running a street, for example, a trash collection fee, it's necessary. I mean, it's a service, and yes, it costs money. So it's going to be, I think, on the one hand, taxes or fees, right? Then judgment bonds, and then a education campaign. And there is where Whitmire will have to take the lead. Yeah. I think he has been leading the city. Mm-hmm. It's a completely different leadership style than the former mayor had before, but it's a leadership style.
I think he's...
And I think it's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. Everything's fine. I think he's growing into the role that the mayors have in Houston, which is that I want to have consensus. I want to hear what you have to say, but I also need to be in charge. And we saw this a little bit, just a spark of this with the Prop A discussion. Like last week in council, they had a discussion about what a certain kind of legislation would do. It would, in this case, the kind of controversy was whether it should go to the Prop A committee, which is sort of the committee that the policies that are brought up by the members, the chamber council members, would go to. There was some sort of back and forth about what really should happen and how. Whitmire says, we don't need that because you can just come to me and I'll help you put it on the agenda. But the council members feel like because Prop A allows them to do it, that they should be able to do it. So we're seeing just a little hints here and there of the kind of emergent sort of leadership style of John Whitmire. But overall, I do think he's been much more consensual than Turner in general.
Right.
But obviously, it's the case that this is still evolving. And he's also run afoul of some folks who want to advocate for more pedestrian and bicycle traffic, right?
Correct.
But, there's this sort of controversy about him sort of rolling back the Vision Zero initiative. He came out and said with some damage control that, he's just got a different way of thinking about this. So I don't think it's like a repudiation of that. We're not going to just shut that down. But it's also the case that maybe there are some people who are going to be unhappy about the way he goes about it. Maybe he ultimately doesn't mind. But
and as you say, getting his feet wet, this is a normal trend that all the cities around the world are going.
It's been 100 days, right? Like you can't,
So we have a very important trend called the 15-minute city, right? And that means that you can walk to any destination within a city within a 15-minute walk.
Interesting.
So that is evolving, right? It's a trend. Obviously, in cities are not already fully grown like city of Houston because it's more complicated. But you can have certain, policies that would direct one way or the other. So I think that, consensus is going to be extremely important because remember now council members can have stuff in the agenda if they want, right? And they just need a couple of people to say, we're going to put this thing. So the balance of power is going to be very interesting in terms of getting these things done. And again, he has, at least in terms of ideology, a quote unquote friendly city council, right? Yeah. But still, obviously, Mayor Whitmire, when he was state senator, was not in a 100% friendly environment, right?
Right. Well, you can be friendly and you can be accommodating, but you also have to
take the leadership. That's why you're the mayor.
Yeah,
absolutely. So
and powers give him that option. So I think we'll see more of that. But how much that irks the council members, we'll see. How much they're willing to push back, we'll see. The dynamics are slightly different than they were during Mayor Turner's time, so there may be more friction, but it's still an ongoing process.
Yeah, so he's great. I give him an in progress,
good. Okay,
it's a good draft.
Good draft. Okay, I like that. Yeah, that's good.
So
I like a good draft.
Yeah,
so sets the stage for.
Yeah, let's publish here and there some parts, and we'll see in the next 100 days.
Well, let's talk about Texas because obviously there's a lot going on here at the state level, and obviously Texas is where we put the partisan in partisan elections.
Yes.
This week, Supreme Court Justice John Devine is facing some questions about his impartiality after a viral clip emerged that he implied the Democrats would basically cheat in the 2024 election to win. He also implied that some of the challenges to Texas abortion laws are a mockery of God and invoked a kind of apocryphal language when discussing Democrats. This was obviously met with a rebuke from several different parties, including Christian Menefee, the Harris County attorney. We also know that there is an effort afoot at the state level to basically try to challenge some of these sitting justices and really putting the kind of partisan politics into this story. Yeah. The Find Out PAC is targeting Jimmy Blacklock, John Devine, and Jane Bland, who have been outspoken on issues of abortion, and there could be some money involved in that. So what do you make of the kind of partisan attacks and the kind of politicization of the judiciary? Of course. I mean, what else is new?
I mean, and Devine's position is, he came out of a, very close primary challenge.
That's true.
That he barely survived. Yeah. And now the general election, he's going to be facing someone that is not just, I'm a lawyer, I'm going to jump into it. He's going to face State District Court Judge Christine Van Weems, that is a Democrat, that already have the, judge judiciary credentials. Mm-hmm. So that's going to be interesting. But obviously, he's taking those positions in terms of, okay, now I have this change from the right. Now I have to go to the override and say stuff, right? And the bad thing, I think, is that these things really hurt the image of justice, right?
That's right.
That's supposed to be blind. Mm-hmm. So when you do these type of comments, you can think about whatever you want to think, but no. Yeah. When you're being a judge, you have to be 100% impartial. Yeah. So when you're saying this kind of stuff, it's like, I don't know.
No, it does definitely put a kind of wrinkle into the notion that we should have impartiality here. And there's a code of conduct for judges that they have to follow. Did he cross it or not? That's the question that the code of the Judicial Commission is going to have to address, if at all. But it is something that we worry about because as these elections become more partisan, so the fact that this PAC, this Find Out PAC exists means that we're going to see more of these things. And if they're at all successful, we're definitely going to see more of it. And that means that you're going to have more partisan elections and there's going to be more partisanship. So we have to kind of be conscious of that. Speaking of the courts, Harris County is in the news again, along with Ken Paxton, who we've talked about a bunch the last couple of weeks. The Attorney General's office has sued Harris County over its guaranteed income program, which they allege violates the Texas Constitution. The program called Uplift Harris is a guaranteed income program pilot that basically gives $500 payments to low-income residents who qualify. They have to meet certain kind of restrictions to qualify. Obviously, this has become quite the kind of political hot potato. The money that is to be used here are ARPA funds. So this is basically COVID relief money. Yep. So it's not technically money from the state.
Yep.
But even if it was money from the state, there is significant case law that says that there are criteria that local municipalities can use in terms of spending this money. So as long as the money is used for a public purpose and has some reasonable relationship to some other public good, and there's some kind of a return on investment, then it's all legal. But courts are going to have to figure out whether or not this applies.
Right.
And Ken Paxton's hoping for a very narrow ruling here, especially on the question about, kind of what constitutes a return on investment. Is it enough of a return on investment that people are better off? I don't know. That's what the courts have to decide.
Right. Well, yes. And the other very important question that could have significant implications, right, is in order to have stands in a court, you have to find, what they said, the habeas corpus, right?
Yes.
So if we're talking about federal money, right, whether it's distributed one way or the other, the substance, right, of that money is not regulated by the Texas Constitution because that's not Texas money.
Yeah.
So the question is, if the courts say yes, and eventually this is going to go up as usual, right? And the courts at the federal level says, Texas has stay, then that opens Pandora box for any state, right?
Yeah.
To say how the federal government is going to distribute their money and how they're going to do these grants or not, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that for me, it's even more important.
Yeah, that's a good point. And honestly, this to me, the bigger picture is that this is sort of a new front on the sort of war on local government, right?
Yeah.
And so we're likely to see this play out in a bunch of different ways, right? Because if it's the case that this kind of giveaway is seen to be against the Texas Constitution, then it may trim back other kinds of efforts that other municipalities might try to do, like paid sick leave, right? What's a giveaway in the context of trying to kind of facilitate some, kind of help for people locally? So lots of big questions here, and we'll see how Harris County kind of plays this out. The last thing we'll talk about this week is the ongoing kind of controversy about the Texas House Speaker's race. This is not to say anything about the U.S. House Speaker's race, which could be in chaos at any moment. In fact, even as we do this, maybe they are. But in the Speaker's race here in Texas, in an open letter titled The Contract with Texas, 23 Republicans have signed on to this idea that there are a list of demands that they expect the next speaker to follow. So, for instance, they include not appointing any Democrats as committee heads, to only contact calls to support the speaker's role from Republican members, and a host of other things. This is really, to me, a kind of clear signal that Dade Phelan is definitely taking arrows from all directions. And there's a lot of people willing to defy him here, mostly people who are running, in primaries. But you're going to talk about probably a glut now of, say, 20 or so people who are willing to defy Speaker Phelan if it's the case that he's reelected and then reelected speaker.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, that's in addition from the Club of Growth that is destined like about $1 million to get, against Phelan. And they just did a very significant buy in the Bowman media market. So,
and the ad looks really good, honestly. Like, it's pretty persuasive. So, that plus $2 million for DFW area reps who are also Phelan folks who are in runoffs, and another $650 for John Kumpel and Gary Van Dever. There are a lot of people who are going to be in jeopardy here.
So, it's still, we have the runoff in May. Still time to, to parse things out, and for Phelan to regroup or not regroup, and for the other side to attack and re-attack one way or the other. But that's going to be something that we're going to analyze in our next episodes. I'm Jeronimo Cortina.
And I'm Brandon Rottinghaus. We'll see you next week.